to inline a function means to copy and paste the instructions of the function instead of calling it. And using inline functions is an alternative to using macros. But in my opinion, it should not be used. And the reason is that good compilers can decide what to inline better than programmers usually. And they can even inline parts of functions and move rarely parts used of a function to some other place in memory. So it's better to let the compiler take care of all of this, unless you use a really bad compiler, which you shouldn't do anyway. GCC and Clang are very good at this. And one more thing, inline, it's not a requirement on the compiler, it's just a hint. There are two restrictions on inline functions, and it is related to linkage. So let's summarize linkage again. External linkage means that a symbol is visible from other files. First, it must be declared in that file, but it is possible to access a symbol, either calling a function or reading or writing a variable. Okay, so internal linkage, that means a variable or a function with the static storage duration that is not visible in other files. And that means they have been declared with static. Okay, then there are two restrictions on a function declared with the inline function specifier. If the inline function has external linkage, then it is not allowed to define modifiable data with static storage duration. Local variables are fine, or non-modifiable data with static storage duration is also fine. And the second restriction is that an inline function with external linkage is not allowed to reference or use any identifier with internal linkage. Okay, so let's now see why these restrictions are in the C standard. First, which one violates the first restriction of this? Well, it is the x. This variable is modifiable, and so this is forbidden. This one, it's not modifiable. Well, it's regardless of whether it is const or not, it is regarded as modifiable if it's not const. Okay, so even though we don't modify it, it would still be forbidden. So what can happen? Well, if we copy the statements of f into another file, then compilers have big troubles keeping track of which memory location this static int x is in. What will happen typically, well, this is, first of all, it's forbidden, so it cannot happen. But what would typically happen, if we assume that this would be done anyway, is that different copies of f would use different copies of x. And so the meaning of the program would not be the same. With this array, it has also static storage duration, since it's static here, but since it is the same everywhere, it doesn't matter. So that is fine to copy A. Okay, that means we shouldn't compare the addresses of this, but just to I mean, then we would get the same problem anyway, but as for x. But since there could be different addresses to different A. But just reading the content, that's fine. Okay, and the second restriction is that an inline function with external linkage is not allowed to use or reference a symbol with internal linkage. Okay, so this one is forbidden. And the reason is approximately the same, namely that different copies of F, or partly copies, since they are copied into another function, would use different G. I mean, they have to use a G located in the file to which it was copied, and the meaning of the program is destroyed. So that's forbidden. Okay, there is a warning about how to use inline. GCC has supported this function specifier for a long time, and long before it was added to the C standard. And when it was added to the C standard, it was not done in exactly the same way that GCC uses it. And since there are lots of library functions and other functions, it is a little bit complicated to change the semantics of GCC. Okay, so how can we handle this? Well, a simple rule that always works is to put an inline function in a header file and then declare it as static inline. So in every file that this function was inlined to, it will be a separate function. I mean, it's just copied and pasted this inline function, so it will look as a different function. Okay, there is a technique or a possibility to go into great depths about this, and you can read this section, but I will not ask about it in the oral exam.